Welcome back to A Slice of News, where I cut you off a slice of news. A federal grand jury has decided not to go forward with indicting Democratic lawmakers that posted a video telling service members and intelligence officials that they were allowed to disobey an illegal order. The argument by the administration was that in doing that, they were violating the statute that forbids interference with the loyalty, morale, or discipline of U.S. armed forces, and that they were attempting to undermine the president's authority. Considering just how many times those on the right claimed that Joe Biden was weaponizing the justice system against Donald Trump and Republicans, this is literally weaponizing the justice system against their political enemies. Because really, those charges were never about undermining the president's authority or interfering with the armed forces. They were trying to charge these lawmakers because they dared go against their leader, and that, in their eyes, is a criminal offense. But the grand jury seemed to have seen through their plan to try to silence their detractors using the Justice Department. It seemed pretty obvious from the start that there was no real merit to these charges, and that it was completely just the president trying to use the Justice Department to make people who say things that he doesn't like pay. In the video, those lawmakers didn't name the president or say he had issued illegal orders. They were basically just saying, if there was an illegal order, you are not required to follow it, which is established military doctrine. It's not anything that isn't already known. They're just repeating it. It seemed pretty obvious that the president and the administration didn't want service members to be reminded of that fact, that they were actually not blindly required to follow any order he gave them, be it legal or not. Had the grand jury decided to go ahead with those charges, it would have really set an extremely dangerous precedent, essentially saying speaking out against the president was now something criminal. Let's not forget that after the release of that video, there were calls to have them imprisoned or possibly executed for sedition. And while it was pretty clear execution was not actually on the table, it was pretty clear the administration was trying to use them as an example in an attempt to dissuade anyone speaking out against their plans and interests in the future. So this decision by the grand jury is a real black eye for the administration because they have failed in that mission. And how they were going to spin this as not blatant political retribution, I don't know, because it seemed pretty clear that's all it ever was. It is interesting to note, though, that in addition to First Amendment speech protection, the speech or debate clause in the Constitution actually gives lawmakers immunity from prosecution for acts taken within the legislative sphere, a fact it would not shock me to find the administration was not aware of. Michigan Senator Alyssa Slotkins, who was one of the 6 members of Congress that the administration attempted to indict, said she hoped this outcome ends this politicized investigation for good, which unfortunately, knowing this administration, is probably wishful thinking. If there's one thing they don't do, it's accept defeat and lose gracefully. In all likelihood, all this will mean is they'll impanel a new grand jury that they hope will give them the result that they want. It seemed very clear that the administration so badly wanted this win, but instead all they got was another failure. What's probably even more embarrassing for the administration is the fact that this sort of rejection by a grand jury in this context used to be pretty rare, but recently they've been collecting them like they were Pokemon cards. The administration just can't seem to stop losing. When they try to clearly use the justice system as a way of silencing and going after their political rivals instead of for what the system is actually designed for, the grand jury once again saying no to them was a big win. It very publicly showed a complete misuse of the Justice Department, and it showed publicly that they just could not get away with it. And for an administration so obsessed with optics, being so publicly shut down probably stung quite a bit. They used to say a grand jury would indict a ham sandwich. So the fact is, grand jury saw what the administration's prosecutors put before them and said they failed to meet the probable cause threshold to get an indictment is a real black eye for them, and shows how unbelievably weak their case here was, if they had one at all, which some, including myself, would argue they did not. It was in essence an attempt to criminalize standing up to the president and standing in the way of his agenda. And the grand jury saw that and said, no. Honestly, I can't think of a single other president, a single other administration that would try to do what they tried to do here. While I don't think those 6 lawmakers would have had to make such a video under any other administration, if they had, any other president would have just come out and said, of course, I'm not going to issue an illegal order. That just goes without saying. But the fact that their first instinct was to censure, to indict, to stop them from even being able to say, hey, maybe don't follow an order that you know to be illegal, even if it comes from the President of the United States, says a lot. They wouldn't have had to get so nervous if they hadn't clearly planned to issue some orders that would be ethically dubious, if not outright illegal, and they didn't want service members to be reminded that they were not compelled to actually follow them. Honestly, in the lead up to the No Kings protest, I was almost positive the president was going to order the military to shoot protesters as enemies of the state for daring to protest against him. Thankfully, that didn't come to pass, but I could certainly have seen him do that, and this video and this reminder to them that they didn't have to shoot protesters if they didn't want to, obviously would not have made him very happy if that was his plan. This extreme reaction by the administration against them really makes you wonder what it is that they do have planned that this may have been getting in the way of. And now that they failed to get their precious indictment, are they just going to try again? Trying to indict these lawmakers was a gross abuse of power, but abuse of power is what this administration is all about and has been from the start. It really feels like there's no reason to believe that they're going to stop now just because they got shut down this one time by the grand jury. We have a government in this country that's run by bullies who only know how to intimidate those they see to be inferior to them, and unfortunately bullies never stop just because you say no and they don't get their way. And really this attempted indictment speaks to a broader issue, which is that the president is using the Justice Department as his own personal weapon against those he sees as trying to limit or undermine his perceived unlimited power. As its name suggests, the Justice Department is supposed to be about seeking justice and upholding the law, but the Justice Department under President Trump is more like a department of injustice that works exclusively for him and a tool to go after his perceived enemies. I think it really raises the question for a future administration how they're going to regain the people's trust in the justice system when they have seen just how it can be manipulated to serve one man and his own petty aims. I think since all the way back in Nixon times, trust in the government by the American people has been pretty low. But at this point, I don't see how it could get any lower, and how a future more benevolent leader is going to rehabilitate an image that is tarnished practically beyond saving, it would seem. Not to mention, now that we can all see what the power of the justice system in the wrong hands can do, what would stop another evil man from coming to power and doing the very same thing that this one is doing? The blueprints for how to misuse the office and to use presidential power for your own gain could not be clearer. And the last thing you want is some future president to pick up where Donald Trump left off. Saying something the president likes should not be a crime, and certainly not in a country that holds their freedom of speech as one of their most sacred rights. Whether you're for him or against him, the American people have the right to criticize the president and to say things that maybe he's not very happy about. I think it's safe to say every past president has had to deal with their fair share of criticism and mockery during their time in office, and not a single one of them, bar maybe Nixon, ever tried to make it illegal to do so. I think it would almost go without saying that to be president, you have to have a certain level of thick skin, an ability to take criticism and not let it completely bring you down, because it's just a part of the office, a part of the role of president is to receive a lot of negative feedback, because a lot of people are just not going to like what you do or what you have to say. And as such, Donald Trump was particularly ill-suited for that job then, because if his skin was any thinner, it would be translucent. A narcissist like him has never been able to take even one iota of criticism, and has lashed out at anyone who even seemed to be criticizing him at any chance he got. He has always been a weak man masquerading as a strong one. So of course, now that he believes himself an absolute authority, he thinks any criticism is treasonous because he is the state. So as a perceived infallible authority figure, any criticism of what he says or does is a criticism of the state, and that is treason, and that is punishable by execution. But as Donnie seems to forget, and the American people have tried multiple times to remind him, he is not a king. Going against his wishes is not a treasonous act, and is not punishable by death. That is the sort of treatment that we formed our country to get away from. And you would hope this rejection by the grand jury would be a reminder of that fact. He's not the Queen of Hearts from Alice in Wonderland that can just say, "Off with their heads," as soon as someone says something that displeases him. The presidency very clearly does not give him the level of control and power that he believed it to, and that makes him very unhappy. He sees himself like an emperor or a king with absolute power, and he hates when he's reminded that he is not. But I suppose as a man with a long and storied history of sexual assault, he is not someone who likes to hear the word no, and certainly when he gets it, he does not listen. I think it's safe to say history will not look kindly on our current times. But even so, I think it is imperative that Donald Trump gets told no as often as possible and shut down in as many ways as can be done. Because as bad as things have become under his leadership, they could always get worse if he's given free rein to do whatever he wishes and to make sure that those who stand against him are unable to do so for long. And the American people cannot allow that to happen. And in the words of Senator Mark Kelly, Donald Trump wants every American to be too scared to speak out against him. The most patriotic thing any of us can do is to not back down. And I couldn't agree more. Alright guys, that'll be it for this episode of A Slice of News. I've been your host, Mr. Slice, and until next time, when I cut you off, another slice of news. And don't forget to rate and review the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else you find it.
Thank you.